Good morning. I'm Kerry Slavens. I'm the Director of Engagement for South Island Prosperity Partnership. In the lead up to Rising Economy Week from November 16th to 20th, I'm talking today to Dave Cowen. Dave is CEO of the world famous Butchart Gardens, located here on southern Vancouver Island. And it really is, it sounds like a cliche, but it really is one of our jewels, both for tourists and locals. Dave is, how do you even begin to describe his role in tourism? It's vast. He's been very active in garden tourism, trying to bring vibrancy as a provincial and national tourism sector. He's also chair of the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority and private sector co-chair of the Pacific Northwest Economic Regions Tourism Working Group. And it's worth mentioning at this point that the Pacific Northwest Economic Region Tourism Association, or PNWER, are our co-hosts for Rising Economy Week. So good morning, Dave. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Kerry. Great to be here.
That's great. Well, you know, one of the very first questions, and one I think we're interested here on the island, Butchart is one of my favorite places in the world. I know it is for many people. How have you been impacted by COVID out there, and what does the future look like? Can you take us through that?
Well, COVID certainly in our 116-year history has been the biggest disruptor that we've ever had to deal with. And that's saying something when you think back to SARS and 9/11 and the 2008 economic crash. So we're an export business. People come from around the world to Victoria and to see the gardens. And we've been down a consistent 90% since COVID hit. When the border closed, our international travelers stopped coming. On the positive side, we've gotten to know our locals a lot more. Our fervent and very loyal 12-month pass holder base is very important to us. And we're making it through. The future we still think is bright for tourism, but we realize for now, while the borders are closed, we have to operate safely.
Okay, and so one of the questions is, when we talk about one or two things that are really, really going to move the needle on tourism's recovery, I assume you have a few points, but opening the borders safely is probably one of them. Am I right?
Yes, and there is a lot of work being done on the air side and cruise, for example, with the US CDC and the BC CDC, a lot of good work by scientists. But beyond that, tourism is a relationship-based sector, and it's also a sector that's heavily impacted by border operation and government regulations because it's travel. So we know through 9/11 and with SARS that there were a lot of learnings, a lot of bits and pieces around border operation that really we feel should be brought forward and looked at again in light of COVID reopening. We should be using this intervening time while the border is closed to plan, because we know we learned a lot after 9/11, particularly in how we communicate with the traveling public and how we instill confidence in the traveling public and get the consumer primed and ready to move within our region again.
Mm-hmm. And I assume, I mean, as a consumer myself of travel, one of the things that I count on are clear messages.
Right.
So I'm assuming that that is part of what you're talking about, those clear communications that really give people the signals that, okay, here's how we're moving forward, here's how you're moving forward with us.
Yes, and this is what is required when you travel. So we feel that some good bilateral discussion, some roundtables between the US and Canada will surface a lot of the procedural detail that is going to be necessary to get leisure travel flowing again. We know that travel will probably initially resume regionally, and that's a good first load to test our procedures to get the rubber tire traffic coming back from the US. You know, we are each other's mutual best customer between the US and Canada, and we need to get that base level of travel flowing again. And in these intervening months, also think about some of the critical connections between our two countries that might be at risk. And I'll point to our international ferry connections. The Clipper and Coho are unique private companies, and they're stuck with a foot in each nation. And without those connections, British Columbia, Victoria in particular, would be far worse off. So we need to look at that infrastructure and protect it.
Well, we talk about our regional economy, but really as part of the Pacific Northwest region, we really are part of that larger region, aren't we? That the
Yes.
Covo, the Clipper create links to. And I know I certainly miss seeing our neighbors from the south. And I've forgotten what an important part of our culture and our economy they are until COVID hit.
It is amazing how entwined our economies are. Uh, and you certainly see it at a place like the Butchart Gardens. But when the tap gets turned off, I suppose this is an opportunity for everybody to reflect on how important neighborly trade is. And within the Pinware region, tourism employs over 800,000 workers and is worth an amazing $71 billion. And amazingly, that figure has grown. Certainly the economic impact year over year, tourism has shown a steady 3 to 5% increase through thick and thin. Tourism is this gossamer thread that goes through every sector. It's part of IT, it's part of trucking, it's part of restaurants, it's part of taxis. So when tourism suffers, really every sector is hit, from accountants to biologists. Everybody pays some cost. So to resume trade and travel really helps all sectors, and it helps all sectors throughout our entire region.
Right. I think that's a super important point. It's easy to take it for granted when it's there and the tourists are down on Government Street and going out to Butchart and throughout our region, but our city is noticeably emptier without them, and less vibrant as well.
Well, it is noticeable, that's for sure, and we certainly feel for the retailers downtown on Government Street in Victoria. They certainly do miss the Clipper and Coho regular sailings and the cruise industry, but Victoria gets 4 million visitors per year. That's quite a broad visitation base. 6 or 700,000 come in quickly by cruise, but when you think of the gap between that number and 4 million, that certainly tells you people are coming from all over the world, and there's no doubt that we notice that gap right now.
Well, yeah, and as you say, tourism is an export industry, and even though we want locals and the region, we want people to support tourism operators, our restaurants, our shops and everything, we really also really need the technologies, the innovations to make sure there can be safe crossings of the borders.
That's so true. And travel at the kind of volume that Canada, British Columbia in particular, has enjoyed for many years was the result of a sophisticated distribution system. And that tap got turned off very quickly. It will not be an overnight process to turn that tap back on. It will take a lot of deliberate planning and a lot of thought. And that's what these roundtable discussions will be so important for. We need to open up those trade channels in deliberate and thoughtful fashion. There are computer systems and airlines and overseas distributors that need time to get primed and to get Victoria back on the radar, to get British Columbia and Canada back on the radar. So really the vulnerable phase for tourism is on startup, because the length of time it's going to take to get back on our feet, to break even and become profitable again, is unknown. And during this downtime, it's very clear what we have to do to survive. But that difficult time when we restart and have to invest in our businesses and reinvest in marketing, that's when tourism will be vulnerable, and we'll need everybody's support to get through that phase.
Well, I'm hopeful that support will really come through for you. And Dave, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up this morning?
Well, to me, it all boils down to learning and planning. What could we be doing now? Also, it's about maintaining relationships and connections while the border is closed, reaching down to our primary market in the US and keeping our friends in the loop with what we're thinking. And then when that border reopens, we just need to communicate effectively with the traveling public. They need to have a sense of confidence, and that's our job. And we'd like to do that collaboratively with government because government has such a hand in the regulations that keep travel safe. And that's a good thing.
Dave and his peers are going to be talking a lot more about tourism and tourism's recovery during Rising Economy Week. I'll remind everybody that's November 16th to 20th. And don't miss the panel on tourism's rebound. I'll remind you also to visit ourrisingeconomy.com, register today, get in there. There's so much fantastic content in this. And while you're at it, please put Butchart Gardens on your list of something to do. It's fabulous at any time of year. And with the winter season coming up, I know it's going to be great as well. So thanks so much, Dave, for being here today.
My pleasure, Kerry.